Yes, it does, man. So how are you? Good to see you again. Good to talk to you.
It's very good to talk to you, Pat. I've been very good. I've been enjoying your podcast. I'm halfway through their most recent one. And I really like the topics, like forgiveness and grief and stuff. Those are really big, awesome topics that I wish more people would talk about.
Yeah, I really appreciate the topics and the questions people send in, especially when I talk with Dan. And, I get it. People want to hear about goblet squats and pressing, but at least for and that's important. But once you do that for like 15 years, it gets a little stale. So
I totally understand.
yeah.
It's nice to get
I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it. That makes me smile.
Absolutely. Last week, I guess it's 2 weeks ago now, I was driving down to Texas to visit 7 sets of family and plenty of time to catch up on podcasts. And so yours was my go-to one. And it was great. A lot of good content. And you and Alex, always fun to hear that.
Yeah, he's a hoot. That guy's a real bird.
And what is with the Robitussin part of it? Is he all about DXM tripping or something?
Yeah, he's all about it. No, it was actually a kind of an inside joke that started a year or two ago on the podcast with Sam and I. He was he was hacking his lungs out, and he just had like a big bottle of Robitussin they were drinking the whole time through the show. So we've just never let him off the hook for that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So I forget when that started, but anyway, it always triggers him because he wants to be called the Hebrew Hammer, and I just call him Robitussin Alex. So.
Yeah, I love it. It's a good nickname too. I don't know if you know this, but I grew up in Omaha as well, so I always like seeing good Midwestern people. And he lived in Omaha, right?
He's back there now. So he was in Israel for 4 years. So Omaha to Israel. Then he came out by me in Pennsylvania for about 2 years. He actually lived with me for about 7 or 8 months as he was just, getting settled. And then I moved out to Wisconsin, and he stayed there for about 2 or 3 more months, and now he's back in Omaha.
Wow. Good for him. Yeah, it's cool seeing his content, too. I've seen this stuff pop up on Strong First, and, of course, actually, way back in the day when you guys were first doing stuff together, I had his program for, like, crawling around, 10 minutes of crawling a day.
Yep. Yeah. His 10-minute crawling challenge. Yeah. He's still going strong with that stuff.
Good. It works. I have everybody I know trying to crawl and roll, and it works.
Yep. Yeah. I'm trying to, he was out here in summer. He came just to pay a little visit for a few days. I'm trying to get him out again. He's a fun dude just to hang around with. So I miss that.
I bet he is. Well, this is all great content so far. It's great discussion. As far as intro, do you want to do an intro like this is Pat Flynn from Chronicles of Strength, and he's got all these books on keto and paleo, and I'd be happy to do that.
No, whatever you want. I mean, if we're already rolling, then apologies for not making this more interesting.
Well, I'm intrigued, and I'm sure a lot of listeners
just picking on
intrigued.
Alex. So, hey, Alex, how you doing?
Robitussin Alex, Hebrew Hammer Fred. That's good stuff. Actually, a lot of people I train with, and I've been on the podcast prior to you. I told them this week that you're going to be on the podcast, and they were just ecstatic to even be on the same show that you're on. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, you got a lot of fans out here in Denver.
I've never been. I have a number. I know I have people have invited me out there to do some stuff in Denver and Boulder, and I would love to go. I mean, I just hear so many awesome things about Colorado and how beautiful it is, and that the fitness scene is very vibrant there.
Very much.
I have no excuse. I just
No,
for whatever reason have just never been. That's just, I don't know, man. I'm kind of weird in the sense that I work for myself, so I could work and travel anywhere, but I'm just such a homebody. I like to kind of stay where I'm at.
I definitely get that. I think we have a similar background, battling through anxieties and depression and finding fitness and guitar and music to help and cope with those. But I'm very introverted, and I try and retreat when I exhaust my resources in public, whether it's interviewing Patagonia, or yesterday we're interviewing Spider at their headquarters in Boulder. And it's great. I got like 2 or 3 hours in me. And then I'm like, I got to retreat and go back home and write or do something non-vocal and non-extroverted.
It's funny you bring that up because I think it partly is. It's not entirely for me, but it partly is an anxiety thing. Because when you're kind of like a high-strung person in general, which I definitely am, you like to have that routine and the monotony. Like it gives you that stability. I was just traveling this past week, so I travel when I have to, and I do enjoy it. When it's happening. But yes, it just tends to agitate me, not having that routine, not having that stability. So my life is very monotonous and boring. I do pretty much the same things every single day. And when I get out of that, Yeah, it's interesting. I could sit here and psychoanalyze myself all day, but it probably isn't the topic of high interest for your listeners, but
You
something to it. Yeah.
might be onto something there. Actually, I think routines are important for every mammal, every creature, like dogs, humans. So I have my routines and stuff, but I think my readers will probably enjoy learning what your morning routines are.
Yeah. Well, like I said, hopefully you guys are ready for a nap because yeah. So I get up, and what I try to do is usually try to do some prayer and meditation first thing in the morning, and again that is very centering to me. That's very important.
Yeah.
And then I typically try to focus my whatever like the biggest task is for me that day. I try to do it first when I feel most energized, fresh. So maybe I'll do a little movement, a little exercise, nothing too intense right away, but just get the blood flowing. And then I'll just get my coffee and I'll get to work. Usually it's a writing project. Almost always it's a writing project. So I'll write anywhere from for a solid 3 to 5 hour block in the mornings. And if I have, that's when I'll also do some podcasts with like Dan, or if I have those scheduled. So writing and podcasts in the morning. I'm somebody who really needs to have that routine. If I get out of the routine, I start to lose that momentum. And I think that's something that would apply to pretty much anybody and anything. Like once you have that momentum going, do everything you can to keep it, because it's so easy to lose momentum in areas. Then I have my my fitness break, which I'll be doing after our conversation here, which usually is around lunchtime ish. And typically I'm fasting, so I'll usually just have my coffee, and then I'll work out generally around 11 or 12, something like that. Come back, I'll break my fast, have some type of lunch. And then at that point, I usually shift gears a little bit. That's when I'll typically do I'll go from sort of the creative, the output mode to the input mode. Then I'll start to study. I'll read, whatever I'm focused on or researching. I'll try and spend at least an hour or two in that. Then I have my music practice. I know, Sean, we both have backgrounds there, so I still try to keep a steady diligence in my creativity with my music as well. So I'm sitting in my basement right now and have my little studio set up. So I always, try to put at least an hour in a day there. Picked up piano as well, so I've been hammering away at the keys, trying to learn a new skill in that department. And then, at that point, I really try, before dinner, if there's some time left, that's when I'll do like the menial kind of monkey work business tasks, the logistical, the boring, technical, dry stuff that just has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to put that off because it's pretty brain dead stuff. So I hate to waste energy on that in the morning. So I usually, the problem is by that time, I'm usually so smoked, sometimes I won't do it at all, but I do try to get it done. Whatever that is, if it's like Facebook advertising or just setting up campaigns in my email system or whatever, just dumb, boring stuff. Then I really try to have a hard stop, as we're getting close to dinner, I really try to, all right, work is done for the day. Now let's focus on the family. We always have family dinner, always spend time with the kids, make sure that we have that time together, really valuable for me. And I think everybody spend time together after dinner, kids in bed. And then really it's just spending time with my wife after that and trying to get to bed at a reasonable enough hour. Again, I'm one of those people. If I don't hit that right bedtime, it just throws everything off. So, and that is pretty much my routine. Certainly throughout the week. Weekends vary; they change up.
Sure.
Sundays, I really try to take off and just spend that day with the family, relaxing, not doing any work. But generally, that's pretty much it.
Hey, that sounds like a really good routine. A lot of similarities with that. Since last time we talked to you, I've definitely been doing more intermittent fasting, and like you, there's a hard stop for the work. There's a eat the frog first mentality, get the hard stuff done real early in the morning, and segmenting the days. I feel for myself, at least, and it sounds like you, helps with creative process and helps with giving your best self to everybody that you're working with or working for or for yourself. So it's cool. I can resonate with that totally.
Yeah, I think so. Creativity is like a muscle, and you need to frequently train it. The muse will arrive when you're patient and you're putting in the work and you're showing up consistently. That's if you wait until you feel creative or if you wait until you feel productive, you're going to be neither. You just have to show up. You have to be on time. You have to stay on the job until the task is done. And if you just do that often enough, every once in a while, won't happen, you'll come out with something halfway decent. And most of the stuff you come out with will be complete rubbish. And that's just the nature of the creative act in general. And that's what most people don't realize from the outside. Have these books out and stuff. It's like, okay, you're reading the finished, edited, polished project that took me years. What you haven't seen are the hundreds of thousands of words that never made it into print, that I would be too embarrassed to print, that no human could ever possibly write that badly.
But it's not on yourself at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, I think, I hope it would inspire people, because people get very despondent, especially on the, when they're on the other side and they're not seeing the grind. They're not seeing the sweat and how arduous and difficult the process is. And really what I'm saying is, like, look, it sucks for all of us. Everything. Yes. It always sucks. You can find joy in the suck. That's true. If you have the right expectations, if you understand it's going to suck, you can kind of laugh at it. You don't have to get depressed over it, but it's always going to suck. Whether it's writing, whether it's fitness, whether it's music, anything that is worth doing, it's always going to suck. And the way you get by that is you understand that that just the suck is part of the process, and you just show up anyways, and you stay on the job, and eventually you'll pop something out that's halfway decent, and you save that, and you try to polish it up, and there's a bunch of crap in between, and then you have another thing that's halfway decent. You save that, you try and polish it up, and then throughout the years you might have like 10 things that are halfway decent, and that's a career.
I love it. So well explained. I'm glad to hear from your point of view too, because, as a creator as well, people tend to just see the good stuff, like especially on YouTube or on Facebook, and they're like, oh, it's so shiny and it's all so perfect. I'm like, there's like 95% crap before that good thing went out. So yeah, glad to hear from you too.
It's true. There's a good book. There's a lot of good books on writing that talk about this. Any good book on writing will admit this. Any book that I've ever read where a writer, makes it seem like it's easy is typically a terribly written book. You read like E.B. White, The Elements of Style. I really like William Zinsser on writing well. I mean, he really talks about this process and how arduous it is. He's a brilliant, beautiful writer. But the cool thing about that book is in one of the chapters, he actually shows one of his original rough drafts. So you actually get to see the process. It's like, oh wow, that really was bad at first, and now it's great. So that was. I remember reading that when I was younger, and I found it very inspiring because then you realize I'm not alone.
Yeah,
and maybe I'm not quite as dumb as I think I am.
Yep.
pretty close, but maybe not quite as dumb.
It's good to be humble, but it's nice to see the humility in other people and see their progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
You gave me some good advice last time we spoke about writing, and it was something to the effect of, you should be able to write 1,000 words about your trash can.
Yes. Yeah.
And it sounds weird to the listeners, I'm sure, but as Engearment, the owner and director of Stoke for Engearment, this podcast, we have 22 writers as of this recording, which is, to me, a mind-boggling. Last year, I think we had 3. So it grew really quick, and people are always asking, how do I write? Like, what do you look for? And honestly, it's just authenticity, and make it interesting.
Well, that's why I love E.B. White. He was one of my early inspirations. I remember in the 2nd grade reading Charlotte's Web and falling in love with him. And then I rediscovered him again in high school, realizing, he has a lot of stuff for adults too. I mean, his collection of essays is just beautiful. But the thing about him is he can talk about chicken coops, something I have no interest in, no knowledge about, but the manner in which he talks about it is so interesting. He's just such a good storyteller. You really feel like you're just kind of sitting on the porch with him, and he's smoking a pipe, and then this all just kind of falls out in this beautiful storytelling voice. And I think and Mark Twain was the same way. And so many of these other great writers have that ability. And that's a challenge. Can you talk about something so otherwise mundane like chicken coops and make it interesting? Because then you've got it, right? Because then when you talk about something that is actually interesting, I mean, you're going to be an absolute force at that point. So I think that's a good writing prompt. Obviously, you don't want to just talk about that, but it's a good challenge. How do I make my trash can? How do I make people want to read about my trash can? Right? What's the story there? What's the analogy? Right? And these little, it's like little workouts, little exercises that I think can really help you to flex that creativity muscle.
That's really good advice, Pat. Appreciate you sharing with our listeners. Gosh, well, speaking of your creativity, I have to plug your books. I mean, you have a lot of published work. Looking on Amazon alone, Introduction to Kettlebells, How to Be Better at Almost Everything, which I picked up and got a copy for some of our trainers as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. I love I like the idea behind generalism. Can you break that down for listeners? What generalism is to you?
Yeah, so that's the thesis of that book you just mentioned, How to Be Better at Almost Everything, which is my newest. That introduction to kettlebells is just like a really trashy $1 ebook I put. That's nothing official by any means. Yeah, that's just it's like a pamphlet. It's embarrassing to even call it a book. But my latest book is that little green one, and the idea of generalism is it was really a reflection on my own experience, realizing I'm not the best at anything, not
Mhm.
even close. But I'm good to great, or at least fairly competent at a lot of different things. And I've been able to stack and combine those skills to form competitive and creative advantages in life that have actually allowed me to circumvent specialists who are better than me in any one particular area. And it's a business leaning book, but I think the principles of generalism can apply to many different areas. So it's really an argument for skill stacking and focusing as much on breadth as you do depth, and that it's easier to be different in many ways than it is to be better. And you can be better by being different.
Oh, I love this. This is great. I'm going to piggyback on that because so think about this. You did the RKC, is that correct?
Yeah, I was at the time, I realized this later, the youngest person to ever pass it, to go through it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, freshman year of college, I was foolish enough to subject myself to that. That was back when it was like a really big hazing event too, where they just beat you up for like 3 days straight.
Oh, they still do that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad those traditions haven't fallen away. Yeah.
No,
you had to carry the kettlebell to the bathroom with you and stuff. It just kind of cool.
Well, we don't have to do that, but that is something we might do next time. I like
that.
But they definitely 3 days of very, very hard work. So yeah, I love the opposite of that because I like the journalism because, like you, I like to be good enough to get the job done in a lot of different categories. I don't care about being the best in any one thing, but I think with Strong First and other industries like that, they are like a mile deep, but only 100 feet wide, or whatever their analogy is, right? So they're really specialized at the best way to do the press, and it's very helpful. But I think it's good to take that kind of knowledge, combine it with, say, FMS or TRX or body weight or whatever else you want to put in your toolkit to help people as far as fitness goes. You can generalize this in a bigger sense too, but
yeah, obviously I'm going to be the last person to disagree with you on that point. My book, but there's, I think we can find some points of reconciliation here where it's still valuable to have those experiences of specialization, to go through like an SFG or an RKC or something like that. And the argument I make in my book is a generalist is just a good short-term specialist, right? We learn to go deep in some, so it doesn't exclude mastery. Like not being the best in the world doesn't mean you still can't be really great or a master at something. And I encourage people to do that, but we don't need to arbitrarily restrict ourselves to just one domain. And in fitness, I think this is a good example because to the extent that we want fitness to be health promoting, specialization can really be a snare. Like if you're just trying to be the best in the world at the deadlift or the press, you are going to get hurt. There's no way around it. Now, look, if that is your lifelong dream and goal, and you understand that this is just the nature of the game, like playing a professional sport, right? If you're going to be a professional athlete, like a football player, you're going to get hurt. That's just the nature of the game. But most people, most of the time, and certainly most of the people I work with, they don't care about having the strongest press in the world. They want a strong press. They want a strong upper body. They want to have some, they want to have some muscle. They want to be lean, but they also want to be really healthy. So in that sense, we can specialize to an extent, but at some point we have to pivot and we have to balance ourselves out and explore other modalities, other approaches, and focus on a robust foundation of general physical preparedness. So maybe we're not going to win a powerlifting competition or a gymnastics competition, but we're going to be able to do a lot of things fairly well, right? We're going to be able to keep up with most people most of the time. And I found that that's really attractive to people because now health and fitness are complementary, which is great, right? Fitness should be health conferring and health promoting. And we avoid those traps of hardcore lifelong specialization. And it's interesting to see these past couple of years how much people have fallen into that trap, and they've really hurt themselves. They've jacked themselves up by specializing in something that, one, they never really wanted to be the best at anyways, and two, quite frankly, they never will be.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Hammer dropped. Love it.
Yeah. And that's not an insult. I mean, like, let's be honest, like it's like 1/8 of like 1% of the population maybe has a chance to be the best in the world at any one particular thing. So I just don't even think it's a very wise pursuit in life. I mean, just
No,
statistically, the odds are, I don't want to discourage your dream. I don't want to explode anyone's dreams here, but there's a better, easier way to get ahead. And that's kind of the argument of my book is you can generalize. You don't have to specialize. And I think you'll be better off for it.
I totally agree. For example, as a fitness professional, I think some of us get into this industry thinking we're going to be working with elite athletes. And, that's not usually the case. For example, this morning, I did my group sessions in the law firm gym that I helped build. And these people are people that would be our parents' age, Pat. And I love seeing them enjoy a higher quality of life, preparing for hikes this weekend or going skiing with their kids or grandkids. And we're just generally helping them with their health, movement, and fitness. We're not specializing in, overhead squatting or tons of snatching. It's just the minimum effective dose to help this person on their path for better health, better well-being, and quality of life.
Yeah. And, and I have worked with many professional athletes and special forces too. And even with them, I would typically generalize. We'd focus on filling gaps. So I would go down to like Camp Lejeune and work with like Marsoc down there and some of those guys, great dudes, but they were like specializing in their fitness and jacking themselves up. And then they weren't able to really do their job as effectively. So we had to go down there, me and a group of guys, and really try to revamp a lot of their training programs and realize, hey, like, and it's funny because a lot of them are like type A. They're very competitive. That's just the nature of that mindset. So they were doing like a lot of specialized type of training, CrossFit, even like trying to be the best at CrossFit.
Sure.
And their physical therapists were realizing this is actually not very conducive to what we need to have these guys be able to do. They're getting hurt. They're burning themselves out. So we came down and we really tried to generalize their training program, kind of in some ways tone it down, but in other ways just introduce new elements there. So even for people who have to operate at a very high level, I still think the case for being at least a generalist to some degree can be made. Now, of course, there's certain exceptions, like Michael Phelps should not read my book. There's no reason for Michael Phelps to read my book.
Sure.
Or Tiger Woods. Unless, there's other areas of their life where that might make sense. But most people just aren't going to be a Michael Phelps. And that's okay. That's totally fine. So I'm talking to everybody who isn't. We have to be selective with our audiences, right?
Oh, sure.
Talking to everybody who isn't that.
No, I'm with you on that. And, to your point too, I was very fortunate to get to work with retired Navy SEAL Eric Frohart in creating a generalized program. And that program we tested for like 2 years based on the strong endurance, which is really minimalist. You will love it, Pat. It's just basically swings and push-ups. Talk about real generalist,
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I know my buddies, the Toshners, are real big.
Oh, yeah, Derek. Okay.
Yeah, they're right by me, by the way. Yeah.
I was
hanging out with Brian just when I first moved here. I got together, had lunch with Ryan. Yeah, great guys.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, Derek and I are in that book, The Quick and the Dead, as well. Eric Frohart's in there, and a lot of great people. Next question for you. Speaking of great people, who do you look up to in the fitness community?
Oh, I mean, so many.
Right.
Obviously, Publ was very influential to me when I was first starting. Dan John, who I talk with every week on my podcast, was a great influence. My starting in fitness was actually because of martial arts, so I can't really exclude that. So, I mean, just the personal names people wouldn't recognize because they were just individual coaches to me at the time, just martial arts instructors. My great friend Sam, who's been on my podcast, he's the one that really first got me into kettlebells. And I remember I was doing a lot of like traditional weightlifting, bodybuilding type of stuff at the time when I first met him my freshman year of college. I was on the Taekwondo team, the competing team. And he's like, hey, we're gonna stop this and we're gonna start doing this. And he introduced me to Brian Petty, he passed away, unfortunately. But he was a huge influence to me, and I trained under him, under bare knuckle boxing, and the first kettlebell exercises he ever had me do were actually just really heavy rack holds. So I didn't even do swings first. I just was introduced with heavy rack holds, and I fell in love with it. So the funny thing is the point being, I think most of the biggest influence in my life are people who really aren't that famous. They were just direct coaches to me. Names that a lot of people they should be famous, arguably. Yeah. Like these are brilliant people. They really shaped my life. My early martial arts coaches, my early kettlebell coaches. But yeah, I mean, on the level where people might be more familiar with, Publ, Dan, just there's so many that I've read and tried to study throughout the years that I probably couldn't even give a complete list.
I know it's a trick question, right? If you ask me that
Yeah.
question, I would be here for half an hour at least, and I forget 2/3 of them.
Yeah. Let me think. Now you got me thinking, because I'll be actually quite honest. I haven't read a fitness book in a long time.
I hear you. I don't no NSCA, no ACE, no NASM. I'm like, all right, I did all those 10 years ago.
I know. It's just, it's like, at some point you just go into different areas of study. So I'm trying to think, like, what's the last, I mean, my bookshelf's right behind me, and Dan John's Can You Go is right here.
Oh yeah.
That one was very good. I always read his stuff when it comes out. So yeah, if I would just to give a huge nod to anybody, it would be Dan.
Yeah, he's such a influential and awesome person. I like getting his audiobook versions, listening to him talk. It's easy to listen to for sure.
Yeah, he's got that storyteller's voice.
He is. It's
he's
like
just a joy.
He's a rock on tour or loquacious. He's good with words.
Yeah.
That's cool. And it's really, how cool is it now to share a podcast with him and have questions come in from people around the world and be able to help them on their paths? That's
cool. It's so fun, because I remember, speaking of influence, I remember reading Dan like in high school when I was first getting into fitness, and like, of course, he was like a superstar to me, like on T Nation and all this stuff. So like, I just like built him up in my mind as like, he was like Angus Young of AC/DC, like this rock star of the fitness world. So like, if you would have told me back then that I'd become great friends with him and be sharing a podcast together, I would have sooner believed I would have been invited to join, literally join AC/DC or something like that. So looking back, I mean, it's so cool. And Dan obviously is just one of the greatest guys. He helped me out so much as I was kind of coming along in the industry. I mean, he asked me for one of my books early on when we met in an expo, and I remember I handed him, it was one of my first self-published books, and he took it, and I was like super embarrassed. I'm like, oh God, Dan John just took my book. He's going to hate it. He comes back an hour and a half later, actually having read a significant portion of it, said that he loved it. We ended up hanging out every single night, till 2 a.m. just with Dan. It's always a party. And you just get taken to the ropes by that guy. You cannot hang with him in anything. And just became great friends, have consistently just shared ideas back and forth. And I've had him on my podcast a number of times, and he kind of just made somewhat of an offhanded remark in an email once. He's like, oh man, I could podcast with you every week. I'm like, well,
since
be careful what you suggest. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And we've been doing it ever since. And people have seemed to really enjoy it. We spend a lot of time, like you said, just taking questions that come in. People send me through email or Instagram or whatever. And it seems to provide a lot of value. And Dan's always just such a pleasure to chat with.
Yeah, it's enjoyable as a listener too, listening to you guys talk and get off topic in a good way. You have cranked out, 351 podcasts now?
Oh my goodness. Have I really?
I just know because I saw it on the podcast screen, but it's a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, I guess I have. And I guess the funny thing is I never even wanted to podcast. I was kind of late in the game. And once I got my last book deal, the How to Be Better. And I'm like, I think a good way to maybe build out some of these ideas, this is part of my creative process, is like, let me just talk through this with some interesting people and get some perspectives of people I think are generalists. And I really thought it would just be a short-term thing. I'd shut it down once I was done with the book. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the conversations. I fell in love with the format. And then people really enjoyed it. My followers wanted me to continue with it. And so here we are, all these 350 episodes later.
That's great. Like you, I really never thought I'd have a podcast. And then, it just randomly did it. I was on a podcast and I was like, wow, this was fun. I was on another podcast. I'm like, this is a lot of fun. Then I looked at the equipment, I'm like, from a musical background, I'm like, all right, we could do better than this. So I love that, like studying people you appreciate and like, all right, that was really cool, but I think we can twist this factor and make it a little bit better. And so I've been in this like rabbit hole of equipment and like microphones and blah, blah, blah. I talk your ear off about it, but it's been a fun process. And it's cool because you can get your content out to people who are driving.
Yes.
Or, doing something in the house, some chores. Whereas, I have a lot of traffic through YouTube, like 3 million people this year. And I love that format. But you can't watch YouTube while you're driving, or you shouldn't. I see some people do that. Yeah. Disclaimer, don't do that. But yeah, just different ways to get content to people in different audiences and affect them and hopefully help them. That's the end goal, like just help people. That's
a good point. It's a very accessible format. So I love writing. That will always be my greatest passion. I don't think I'm necessarily the most well-spoken. I don't have any training in speaking at all. I'm not a professional speaker. That's why I jumble my
Wow.
words so much. But to your point is, people are busy.
Yeah.
A lot of them are consuming content on the go. They can't read my long-winded emails as they're driving to work. So it just gives another potential touch point, and one that is a lot more accessible to people. I mean, I know a lot of people just listen to my podcast even when they're at the gym, when
Yeah.
they're just going for their walk. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that from you too. And speaking of your emails, you are proficient at good copywriting, and you send them out diligently. It's really impressive. And for the listeners out there, how this conversation even came about this week was one of the emails Pat has sent out featured a Saint Bernard. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Which I own one of those. That one wasn't mine. That was a stock photo, but I do own a Saint Bernard. Yeah.
What a great dog, right?
Just absolute disaster, to be honest.
Beethoven style.
I mean, just the full and complete package there. I mean, her name's Lola. She's beautiful. She's the sweetest dog. She's so incredibly gentle with the kids. But I mean, just wherever where she's been, because there's just a pile of drool and fur everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, being good with kids is where I was going to go with this. And it's ironic. So this conversation happened because I replied to Pat, and I said that my mother-in-law used to babysit twins or triplets, and the Saint Bernard that would help her was named Samantha. My wife's name is Samantha because of this Saint Bernard.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
First off, I love when animal names are like very close and somewhat oddly like human in nature.
Yeah.
Like naming a dog like Theodore, or like
Kevin.
a cat Sharon. Yeah, Kevin.
There's a Kevin dog in our neighborhood. I'm like, that's too human. Change it. Or Steve.
Yeah, Kevin or Sharon. If I get a cat, it'll definitely be Sharon at some point. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I want to blow your mind. One next level. She lived in Zanesville.
Oh, no stuff.
Yeah, no, nice save. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, no, this is a funny thing. I try not to be vulgar anyways, but
Sure.
One thing people have said about my podcast, it was a good point I didn't think about. They're like, I like your podcast because, not that I have anything against, vulgar language, they would
Sure.
say, but I have my kids in the car.
Yes.
So just like as a marketing tip, like if you don't need to be obnoxious in your language, just realize a lot of people drive around with their kids and they want to listen to your show, but they might not air it if you're just,
That's a very good point.
A
lot of people our age do have kids and they want to consume the content. And if you drop an F-bomb, that probably won't listen to you again.
Yeah, and part of it's a creativity challenge. Like if I can't be interesting without cussing or being really vulgar, then how interesting am I actually? And that's why I look to a lot of the old great comedians who were hilarious and again, nothing against like a good vulgar joke every now and then, don't get me wrong, but there's something about like the funniest people like Mark Twain or Ring Lardner who could just be so hilarious without relying on any cheap tricks.
Yep.
And then, they pull out a cheap trick every now and then is fine. But like that to me was always something worth striving for. But anyways, getting off point, you brought up Zanesville, which is of all places.
Right. And you were just there for your most recent interview, right?
Yeah, so I was invited on EWTN, which is the Catholic channel that everyone clicks by when they're trying to find something to watch. And it was of all places, the studio was in Zanesville, Ohio, which I have never been to, but it was a nice trip because we got to pop over in Michigan and see some friends, and then get down there and see Zanesville, Ohio.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I tell you, the Las Vegas of the Midwest.
Yes, they have a Chipotle now, so they're making progress.
Yeah, Chipotle, great Amish coffee, however. So the Amish coffee and eggs were just superb. So that was worth it.
And that's the secret of that part of Ohio. My father-in-law, her father, lives out in this really tiny city called Coshocton. He's like the only white person who's not Amish out there. And you'll see more buggies than you do cars out there. It's crazy. The home cooked meals are great.
It is, and I love the Amish. So there was we weren't too far from Lancaster when we were in PA, so we would go up and visit Amish country every now and then. And the food and the people, they're all so friendly and wonderful, and they have great eggs. Great eggs. We would get the eggs all the time, and so it was fun going into the coffee shops and just seeing that. So cheap too. It was like $5 for a huge platter of eggs and sausage and coffee. It was
Did
fantastic.
you get any fried chicken when you're out there? There's a lot of chickens out there.
No fried chicken, but I guess that's a reason to go back, huh?
If you have to. Well, here's a deeper question. You mentioned on one of your podcasts about, not always being Catholic. Do you mind if I ask what brought you into seeking a connection with religion?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what the interview was on EWTN. So they had
Oh,
the
okay.
segment called the Journey Home, and what they is they talk to converts like me.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is fresh in my memory. I just talked about it right for an
Sweet.
hour. So just to give people a little bit more background, I'm in the fitness industry, but my education isn't even related to that. My undergrad's in economics and my master's is in philosophy. So I was baptized when I was young, but I fell away from faith at a pretty early age. Um, and like I remember specifically in like the sixth grade science class, my teacher going over like the Big Bang Theory, the origins of the universe, and I just remember thinking, hey, like this isn't what I learned in like my first grade Sunday school class. What's going on here, right?
Hmm.
And rather than seeking any like theologically nuanced position or asking like what the adult version was of the theology I received, I really just started becoming very skeptical and started kind of just shrugging off whatever type of religious affiliation I had at the time. And then as I got more interested in certain writers and philosophers in high school, I really stumbled upon a lot of like, I brought up Mark Twain, right? He was always kind of throwing out different zingers at religious worldviews. And I don't know what his final religious position was. He was interesting. You could always kind of see him like leaning towards religion, then he'd
Hmm.
suddenly veer back and then he'd lean. So you could tell there was a deep struggle there with him. But another writer I really liked was H.L. Mencken, and he was a polemicist. He's like one of those old atheists, really just despised religion, made fun of it. So he influenced me a lot. He had a book originally, the first English work of Friedrich Nietzsche. So
Cool.
he kind of passed me off to him and all these other sort of old atheists and materialists. So I became a very skeptical person for a long time, especially as I really started getting interested in philosophy and studying more philosophy. Um, and then really the short story is I just realized that worldview, like the naturalistic, the metaphysical naturalistic, the physicalist, the reductionist worldview just does not work. It can't account for certain basic obvious facts of reality, whether it's consciousness, why any contingent state of affairs exists. It's just inadequate. And it was actually by going deeper into that worldview that I eventually came out of it and realized there's got to be a better system here. There's got to be a better worldview. So I then decided to go back and study all the philosophers that I more or less ignored, going
Hmm.
back to the classics, Plato, Aristotle, Boethius, Augustine, going up to St. Thomas Aquinas. And he really impressed me. I mean, Saint Thomas, he seemed like the acme of philosophical thought to me. His whole view, and it's Platonic in nature, so it's not radically his own, but he was a great synthesizer. And the way that he sort of looked at existence and the world and the arguments he gave, the rational arguments he gave when properly understood for God's existence and nature, I found at first very interesting. And then as I studied more people in this sort of Thomistic tradition, I have eventually found them convincing. So that kind of brought me into a new worldview. And that worldview was at least consistent with Christianity, right? And obviously Aquinas was a Catholic, but for at that point I was really mostly interested in his philosophical thought, not his religious beliefs. And then, I kind of actually spent a lot of time with religious pluralism, like people like Aldous Huxley and the perennial philosophy. And just cut me off if I'm going on too long here.
No, I'm digging this.
And that's the kind of view like, okay, well, all religions are right and wrong in the
Hmm.
sense that they're all kind of like pointing at the same thing, but none of them quite gets it, right? So
Hmm.
just pick whatever does it for you. Another way of kind of portraying that view is all religions are superficially different but fundamentally the same. But as I then really began to study the different world religions, Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, and eventually Christianity, I realized it's actually the opposite that's the case. Religions are only superficially the same, but they're fundamentally different. They're fundamentally different in their metaphysics, their worldview, in human identity, anthropology, in human meaning, morality, destiny. Like all the major questions are fundamentally, I mean, just like compare Islam and Buddhism, just to give you an example, right?
Yeah.
They're radically different. So I came to realize, there's no good reason not to think that some religion might actually be true. It just seems like a bias that we have of our sort of pluralistic culture at this time. And then I just took off the philosopher hat and put on the historian hat and really tried to investigate like this Christianity is interesting because it's not like an eternal religion. Like it just happened. Like it just emerged amazingly, like
Hmm.
fantastically. So then I read the work of various historians and philosophers of history like William Lane Craig or N.T. Wright, and realized that there was a really solid historical case to be made about certain facts of the life of Jesus. Facts that the vast majority of historians agree on, whether they're religious or not, just like his existence, his crucifixion, empty tomb, post-mortem appearances. And then it's really a question of, well, how do you best explain them? And at this point, if I were still an atheist, I would have said there has to be some natural explanation. Maybe it's a conspiracy, maybe it's hallucinations, but it can't be a miracle, right? Because that would be impossible. But at this point, I already was convinced that God exists, and if God exists, and miracles are obviously possible, and none of these naturalistic explanations can really account for the data, then it just seems reasonable to go with the traditional account, especially in the like historical religious context at the time. This cannot be explained naturalistically. And like the fact that we even have any evidence at all, let alone strong evidence, was really surprising to me. Like really alarmed me. Was not what I was expecting. Because you kind of go in with this bias to like disprove it, and you kind of come out with your mindset fundamentally changed. So that's kind of the short of it. And then, how did I become Catholic? It was just again, studying the earliest Christians, the church fathers, Clement, Ignatius, Irenaeus, seeing that they talked about the hierarchy, the visibility of the church, the sacramentality of the church, and just seeing, okay, the Catholic Church's claim that it reaches right back seems to be correct. And and it's funny because like, if you would have told me even 5 years ago, especially 10 years ago, that I would ever be Catholic, I would have went to bed with a petrified diaphragm from laughing so hard. But yeah, here we are, right?
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. What a beautiful path, though. That's cool to see that you came back to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely fundamentally transforming. And there's a lot of other stuff that's mixed into that, right? That's kind of like the heady side. There's an emotional and a huge heart side too. I mean, having kids, having a wife, realizing that the love you have for your children and people in your life really isn't reducible to just like a cloud of fundamental particles, right?
Yeah,
like
well said.
You just can't do it, right? There's that too. That's a very probative and suggestive experience. Like just the nature of love by itself, and you can't make sense of that in a reductionistic sense. Certainly not in a deterministic sense, because then that isn't even love at all. Then we're just kind of puppets, right? And Christianity and Catholicism had the philosophical and theological equipment to give love what I think was its full and correct meaning. So that was a big aspect of it, especially for my wife, who was never religious and never baptized. She had her own sort of experience with that, especially when having kids.
Wow. Well, thank you for taking the time to open up and explain that. It's beautiful to me. I myself am not, church going and all that, but I like the correlation I think you and Dan John brought together about religion coming from ligament to connect. And I think to connect with love is,
Dan's interesting too, because like his degree is actually theology. A lot of people assume both of us our degrees are in physiology or kinese, but that's actually not the case. And it's funny, because we were kind of jamming back and forth on the last episode about the definition of religion. It's something philosophers quarrel about. Some will say it's like ultimate commitment in life, and that was the point I was pressing, is like, look, like everybody has that, so in a sense, like everybody's religious in some sense. And Dan kind of went through the etymology of saying, well, look, it's from, it's similar to the word ligament, a linking back, a tradition. And I like that better, that definition. I think it's more accurate, because the traditional view of religion, the way that at least Catholics look at religion, is it's actually a virtue, in the sense that it kind of falls under a category of justice, and that God has given us absolutely everything. And we could never repay it, nor does God need to be repaid. But it's good for us to want to repay it, to want to give worship to God, to want to link back to God in the way that he has provided for us. And then the question is, has he provided us a way? Has he given us a church? Because if so, then I should want to be a part of that for my own benefit, and out of a sense of obligation and justice and duty. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of take the religious question, but the way Dan was kind of I think is pretty attractive.
It's very attractive, because up until I heard that, I was not particularly religious. I was like, oh, but I do love the connection to something bigger, and using love to get there. It was cool. So tell Dan that I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I will. And it is true, because, we obviously I believe we're all made from and for God. And we see this with everybody, everybody, even when I was in the deepest pit of my skepticism, there's still that soul's upward yearning, right? There's that dynamism of the intellect and the will that just is never fully satisfied in this finite world, right? It's looking for that infinite and perfect plenitude of goodness and perfection and beauty itself. And either we're just made for frustration, either that doesn't exist, or it exists in something beyond these restrictions and boundaries here. And we all experience it. We all do. So that's not like a logical argument for anything, but it's a suggestive one that leads people like St. Augustine to say beautiful lines like, our hearts are restless and they will not rest until they rest in thee, O Lord. Like that's what it's getting at. So everybody experiences this in different ways, but it's something that's deeply relatable. And I think that anybody can, recognize, no matter where they're at in life, that yes, this is a fact of experience.
No, that's beautifully put. I know for a lot of people I hang out with, our religion is mountains and snow. And I know it sounds really oversimplified, but for a lot of us, that's our church, and that's where we feel most at peace and most whole and most caring for each other or our loved ones who might not be with us. And so we shoot videos to like, hey, we wish you were here so you can live vicariously through us in this moment.
And for me, it's a beautiful both and, right? It's like the glory of God is found in everything, right? Yes. So the majesty of the mountains, the rivers. Like I just look at a cup of coffee sometimes. I'm like, that's beautiful, right?
I hear you. I look at a tree for half an hour and be totally
just like, that's so beautiful. So like, there's many opportunities for grace and reverence and this or that. And so I'm with you. Sometimes I love to be in church. I love to pray in church. Sometimes I just love to go outside, go for a walk. All that.
I like to hear that. That's cool. Mm-hmm. Very relatable. Well, you brought up something really funny a long time ago. I forget what webinar it was. It was about exercise. You said it's like skiing uphill. And who wants to do that? Well, Pat, I like to ski uphill.
Yeah, you're the one guy. I'm like, I think it was like showing the like metabolic equivalent of like, okay, swinging a kettlebell was like uphill cross country skiing, but the good news is it's not uphill cross country skiing because who on earth would? And there we go. Somebody actually wants to do that. Yes,
it's so funny. I've been waiting years to tell you that. It's true. I really enjoy uphill skiing.
The uphill part, especially. Wow, good for you, man.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
And I'm not alone. This is kind of fun. I'm one of the administrators for I think it's the world's biggest Facebook group for backcountry skiers and snowboarders. So there's about 5,000 of us that like to ski uphill.
Yeah.
So we're weird.
Hey, you know what? To be fair, I've never tried it, so I could just be completely wrong. And jokes aside, I'm sure I would enjoy it, especially if I'm doing it with you. That'd be fun.
I would love that. You know what? The invitation is always there for you. I'll take care of you and get you up there. A very famous person in this community, Jeremy Jones, once said, he didn't say it once, he says it all the time, the journey is the reward. And I think it applies not just to uphill skiing, because then you get to ski back down or snowboard back down, but often in life, the journey is the reward. Mm-hmm. What you learn along the way, what you appreciate along the way is more meaningful than that, 5-minute run or the passing the finish line in the race or whatever it is you're doing. It's that journey that builds the character and the fortitude and the resilience and appreciation for life.
Absolutely. There's so much truth in that, especially in fitness, is that, okay, what's the end here? A 6-pack abs? Like that's what we want. And then like this actually goes back to the point, right? Because whoever gets 6-pack abs, they're never like, that's it. I'm perfectly happy. I'm content. I don't need anything else. No, they realize that wasn't the ultimate source of fulfillment. So that actually invites a deeper theological question. But just to keep it simple, to your point, is that, okay, as long as we understand that 6-pack abs is not my complete contentment in life, there can still be so much inherent, especially moral value in striving for this by disciplining my desires to make certain goods accessible and then effortless, that I can develop in temperance. I can develop in fortitude, all the things that you just said. And those are inherently good character traits as long as they're in the right context. Mm-hmm. And that makes all the difference, especially in fitness, because we see that people who just obsess over that particular end, and they really think that if they have that end or they have more of it, then they'll finally be happy. 6% body. As soon as I get the 6% body fat, I'll finally they get the 6% body fat. Actually, I need to be at 5. When I'm at 5% body fat, and that's destructive. That's unhealthy.
It's so unhealthy.
That is disordered. That is when fitness has run amok. But if you rather see, okay, I'm going to focus on, nothing wrong with wanting to look good. Honestly, I have nothing against that. But if that is all you think about, I think you're going to cause yourself a lot of misery. I do. But if you realize that there's actually greater opportunity here, like you said, to really just focus on developing certain character traits like temperance, like fortitude, those are the two big ones. Like there's like fasting and exercise right there, embodied in the virtues. Then, awesome. I think you're going to have a much more fulfilling and worthwhile experience with exercise when you take that more expansive mindset.
Yeah, I love that. Well put. And I like seeing people come into exercise as a recharge, as a reward, not a punishment, not something they have to do. Like, they come in because they're going to do something good for themselves. They get a little time away from their family, or they do it with their family, whatever it is, but they're doing something, investing in themselves so they can be the best version of themselves to do what they want to do.
Yeah, I obviously agree with that exercise, that the trial is fun. It's challenging. Kind of like we were talking about before. Like, it sucks, but we can enjoy the suck for many. Like, it's fun.
Enjoy the
fun.
suck.
It's fun to grind. It's fun. It's fun to work hard. It's fun to be challenged. You just need to have the right expectations about these things. And it wouldn't really be rewarding if there wasn't any challenge to begin with. Like, if everybody just had it automatically, it doesn't seem like we'd have the opportunities for those important characteristics to develop, that important moral growth.
Oh, totally, Pat. I think resistance, in any kind of form, whether it's weight or life events or challenging events, build the strength that you need to take on the next challenge. If you just fixed it like that, and you wouldn't have like you said, the character traits to benefit in life.
Yeah, and I think generalism can help there too, right? When you're not obsessed with being the best in the world, then you can kind of get out of that ego comparative trap of always like comparing yourself to other people, which again it can be very destructive. Good to take inspiration from people. Good.
Sure,
that's awesome. That's good. But when you start constantly putting yourself down or feeling like you're not enough, or you'll never be happy until you beat the other guy, that I think can be a very destructive mindset. But like what you said, you can take inspiration, you can be a generalist, you can short-term specialize, and you can avoid all those snares almost completely, and really, I think, have a lot more fun in the process along the way.
Totally agree. I hope the listeners are capturing the truth in this from you and from me. Don't take things so damn seriously, and just do the work and go have fun.
Yeah, and it is fun. Learning new skills is fun too. I'm always trying to learn different things in outside and in the gym that I suck at. And
totally.
once you just realize that the process is just what it is, you can laugh, you can goof around. Like this past year and a half, handstands were my big thing. I've gotten pretty good at them, but I mean, like for the first 5 months, I was just constantly falling on my back and on my face, but I had a good time doing it. And you get frustrated every now and then, but you just realize, look, I've been through this before. I know if I keep sticking with it, those connections in my brain will form.
Yeah.
Come hell or high water, if I just keep sticking with it, I will be able to finally stick this thing. And if you just trust, that's another key too, is trusting the process. Having a process, and you trust the process will work if you stick with it, then it's liberating. It's very freeing.
Oh, I like that a lot. Well, I'm not good at handstands yet. I'm pretty good at headstands. I was down with I want to say nieces, but I guess technically they're actually cousins first removed, or I don't know. I need a pie chart to figure it out, but relatives. And we're doing headstands, and they were doing some handstands during gymnastics, and it's fun. That's the fun part about health and fitness is, getting on the ground and playing with the kids and the dogs and just rolling around and getting dirty and not having limitations in a way, because you have put in the hard work to make sure the patterns are good, and that they're good, you load them, and then you recover and you do all the things in meditation and praying and whatever else you do to make you whole. So then you go to do something fun, you can do it.
And it's funny because, I work with a wide range of people, but consistently, people who are a little bit older, that's what you hear more than anything else. They don't care so much about having visible 6-pack abs or, winning a power. They just want to be able to, when their grandkids come around, if they're not here already, they want to be active with them. They want to take them on physical adventures. They want to wrestle with them. And I think that's great. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Pat, this has been a lot of fun. Can you believe it's been an hour? That's crazy.
Oh my goodness. Already. Yeah.
I want to keep talking, but you've given me an hour of your time already. We need to do this again, I think.
That'd be my pleasure. This has been a true joy.
Well, ditto. It's been a very big joy on my part too. Is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with to digest over the weekend? And where can people find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me think on the digesting thing. A steak. Right? Digest a steak this weekend. That sounds
Make it
good.
2.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah. So me, the Pat Flynn Show is my podcast. And my website is is chroniclesofstrength.com. So you can find links to my podcast there. And like you said, the place I'm most active is my email list. I try to make my emails useful, occasionally entertaining.
They're both.
Thank you very much. And you can hop on there at my website. Or if you're super into kettlebells, the other website is 101kettlebellworkouts.com. So that's the numbers 101kettlebellworkouts.com. You'll get a big fat course and offensive PDF of just literally 101 of my kettlebell workouts throughout the years. And you can just treat it like a buffet. Take what interests you, leave what doesn't. That'll get you on my email list, and you'll have a bunch of kettlebell workouts too. So that'd be the best place.
Oh, sounds great. Well, speaking of steaks, I told you I went down to Texas to visit family, and I stayed with a person who I'd never met, George Harrison. What a great name. So I show up at George's house. He had 2 steaks cooking in butter and a bottle of whiskey. I was like, I like George.
George,
so George is the man. Yeah, thank you, George.
I love you, George. Yeah.
He was great. He's like a Dan John to me. He kept me up to like 1:30 talking about life. We finished all the whiskey, woke up hungover. He's like, all right, let's go feed the cows. I'm like, cows? He's like, yep, son, we're on 350 acres out here in Texas, and we got in the John Deere, and we fed 55 cattle and 2 horses.
Isn't that beautiful though? Like,
I
talk
love
about
it.
the good life, right?
It was so great.
It's like those are the moments. Those are the memories that really last.
They are. As a good quality person, he was a father-in-law for my cousin, and random events, good people, good conversations, staying up late talking about life, and he's very into fitness too. He had a garage gym and showed me how to do a pistol squat, and then we, feeding cows and eating cows. It's great.
Yeah, and I guess that'd be the last thing I'd say for people to digest. Like, never miss an opportunity for that. Like, if you have something like that coming up, like, you never regret having, maybe you regret having one more drink, but you never regret having that one more hour of conversation at least. So I'll hedge the claim a little bit, right?
Yeah, you can take some charcoal and some water and get through that.
And the thing you do regret, like looking back, especially with family members who are older, and most of my grandparents are gone now, is you do regret the times where you said no. You wish that I would have done that extra dinner. I wish I would have done that extra lunch. So
Absolutely.
I think that's what I would leave them with. Yep.
Pat, let's leave them with that, and let's lead with that in the next one, because you and I can get really deep on that one.
Would love it.
Awesome. Well, Pat, all the best to you and your family and all of your super fans and all the people that you have in your influence. You're leading them in a good direction. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. A pleasure.
Absolutely. And all the listeners out there from the Engearment.com podcast, I love you like always, and thank you for listening.